The activists of today will be the business as usual of the future, except if humans have an action plan in common. We humans already are divided about carbon dioxide emissions, so focusing on emissions cannot readily lead to an action plan in common. Focusing on carbon agroforests produces the yearly production of oil equivalent to Saudi Arabia for at least 10,000 years, and in a renewable and superior form, so it satisfies those that now focus on drill baby drill. The only resource for this immense and unedited production and effective horn of abundance will be exactly the 1.5 trillion tons of already emitted industrial carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That means that the challenge as well as the division will be solved. That is the soundest base for an action plan in common. The activists will have all the food and consequent health that carbon agroforests guarantees, and that the former generation of rebellion that became business as usual does not present anymore. All other parties will have benefits and we humans will thrive again and conflicts will ease, because no suffering humans will be left for dividing parties to exploit. Without action plan in common, actual humans without action plan in common, systematically choose for, and or cling to things, that we know in advance will not take any effort or commitment on our part, we will call it park and ride or simply park, and it is the motor and protector of business as usual. Since there is no such thing as something that makes all humans thrive and or solve all of our challenges without effort or commitment on our part, obviously no one will end up choosing these things or clinging to them, simply because this is not reality and does not exist. The above-mentioned park and ride will end up becoming a distraction, and a false security, this independently from which person or group it comes forth. The only thing that varies is the way, trick, or excuse divided humans will use to park and go. And the only result will be that the person or group that distracts will become a kind of hero, innocent or of saint, at least in its circle, or where it matters most for the dividing party, and only for the time that that particular way or trick remains in vogue or at least somehow recognized. Activists like Greta Thunberg claim one or two few things as the cause, for example carbon dioxide as the cause, and blame companies and or politicians for provoking the pointed out causes of the challenges or threats. By the way, despite what we write, we are great fans of Greta Thunberg, as well as all other activists, and that is exactly why she and they take the brunt first. One of our constructive criticisms towards them is the fact that while there are many other challenges much more to the core of the problem and eventual thriving, she and they choose to focus on a challenge that guarantees best that they will not have to make any additional effort or commitment on their part. We hope that Greta Thunberg, as well as all other activists, will take on us, the authors of this video, series, and channel, and invite as many as possible others to do the same. To take the brunt is what we ask for, because this video, series, and channel do not get any likes or dislikes, because it comes up with and proposes a plan in which we all have to make certain efforts and make some commitments, and that is exactly what they and all other humans systematically avoid, as explained in the introduction of this video. Not getting any likes or dislikes is the worst case, and will lead to the extinction of this action plan, these channels, and related initiatives. So us taking the brunt is not at all our worst case. If a number of, or all humans choose for the same action plan, they will inevitably be confronted with a certain demand for efforts and commitments, but inevitably, it will be also them that will take the many rewards, including financial ones, and very eventually enjoy the horn of abundance of the carbon agroforest and safe havens they chose for. In the case of the activists that support an action plan in common, in the worst case that they would not achieve any of the above, what they will not suffer is what happens right now with their pioneers, the rebellions of the 60s and 70s. What they suffer now is not independent from decisions and actions in the past. Apart from taking the brunt from the young activists, the rebellions of the 60s and 70s suffer degenerative diseases that somehow inevitably lead to depending on others, prolonged care and or hospital care, death, and quite often to some form of Alzheimer's, which is a form of dementia. In comparison, humans that participate in an action plan, that we call carbon agroforest, will experience a lifetime with the best heart and brain health, as well as a relative absence of all degenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. The risk for Greta Thunberg and other similar activists to have to make an effort or compromise is zero, and yet she and all similar activists will be heroes, innocents, and or saints, at least in the circles that matter for them, and only for the time their team is in vogue or recognized. This makes that they, including Greta Thunberg, are or will someday in the near future become distractors at best, and sellers of false securities at worst. This strategy, team, or behavior will most likely, for most of them, be temporary, similar to all similar groups in the past that have eventually adapted and survived within or exactly through business as usual. The large group that today depends on pensions and healthcare or has passed away, back then were the revolting hippies and macrobiotics, and or vegans and vegetarians preferring or eating exclusively organic and fresh food of the 60s and 70s, which not much later would become the boomers, which made up or depended on the world that spins around business as usual, and in cases became the leaders of industries, and the politicians, of a world that spins around business as usual, which includes all that is unsustainable, emitting and dividing and consequent, making all more vulnerable for conflicts. Ironically, for the same causes and reasons revolting hippies and macrobiotics of the past are the by Greta Thunberg and other activists accused groups of humans. Of one thing we all can be sure, that is the last thing the accused groups of the past expected at the time. And if the actual activists will not learn from this ironic twist of fate, exactly the same or very similar thing will happen to them when they will depend on the new revolutionaries and activists, that is if all these groups of humans still will exist by then. What these activists of the past and the actual activists have in common, and will make both of them the failures of the past in a not too far future, is that none of them had an action plan in common. An action plan in common is where this video, series, and channel is all about.